Hi, I'm Captain John Woody, the Director of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's Food Defense and Emergency Coordination Staff in the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, and I'd like to welcome you to the 52nd FSMA Chat. Our presenters today are Colin Barthel and Miguel Hernandez. Colin is a Senior Policy Analyst with the Food Defense and Emergency Coordination Staff at CFSAN, and Miguel is in the Office of Regulatory Affairs and is the Branch Chief for the Produce Safety Network. Today's chat will introduce you to the Food Defense Inspection Team, but will also give you background on the FSMA Intentional Adulteration Rule, or IA Rule as we refer to it, and an overview of its implementation. After their presentations, Colin and Miguel will also answer questions that were submitted prior to the chat. With that, Colin, take it away.
Thanks, John. Thank you all for coming to the FSMA Chat this afternoon, and we will go into, as John mentioned, the Intentional Adulteration Rule, but also its implementation and the programs that we are putting in place in order to credibly ensure oversight of this new and first-of-its-kind regulation. First off, I want to get into a little bit of background on food defense. Food defense is different than food safety. It is the effort to protect food from intentional adulteration where an attacker would intend to cause wide-scale public health harm. This is part of the Food Safety Modernization Act, and Congress directed FDA to regulate in this area, specifically within Sections 103 and 106 of FSMA. And so the Intentional Adulteration Rule is the result of that direction from Congress. And so we'll get into what the rule requires in just a moment. I also want to highlight that the area of food defense has also been highlighted recently with a national security memorandum. This is an executive order signed by President Biden on November 10th of last year, and it is requiring that the interagency community take additional steps to protect food from intentional adulteration and other threats. Now, the intentional adulteration rules rollout includes a couple of different program areas. It is one of the FSMA foundational rules, and so it is a primary area of FSMA regulation. It's also an innovative approach to regulation. Unlike areas of food safety that have a long history of regulatory programs, food defense does not. And so this is an innovative area for FDA. It is the first rule of its kind in the world, and so as a result, we don't have regulatory history on firms with regards to food defense. And so FDA really is going to be paving the way in this area. And so this new program is the first one of its kind. The regulation is the first of its kind in the world. And so we've been able to kind of think creatively as to the best way to regulate the area of food defense and intentional adulteration. The IA rule has been rolled out in two different phases. And so I'll talk about those each a little bit. We are going to be focusing on the comprehensive inspection aspect in this FSMA chat. But we've also been conducting what we call food defense plan quick checks. Those of you who have been conducting food safety inspections may be familiar with this activity. This is a presence-absence determination of the food defense plan when our inspectional staff are going out to firms for a normal routine food safety inspection. And so what we do during a food defense plan quick check is to essentially determine whether that firm has developed their food defense plan. We don't go into any determinations of adequacy or the appropriateness of the rationale or conclusions that the facility has made in developing the food defense plan. But what we do is we determine that the firm has developed the plan and that the plan has the 5 required components that are part of the IA rules requirements. And those are a vulnerability assessment, the identification of actionable process steps, the identification of mitigation strategies to protect those actionable process steps, and then what we call management components. These are food defense monitoring, food defense corrective actions procedures, and food defense verification. And then we do some other administrative actions, such as making sure that the plan has been signed and dated. So that is what's involved in a Food Defense Plan Quick Check. And these have been happening since March of 2020. The pandemic did disrupt the pace of these Food Defense Plan Quick Checks a little bit, but now we've conducted over 1,200 Food Defense Plan Quick Checks to date on both foreign and domestic facilities. The next phase, which is what we're going to be talking about today, are comprehensive food defense inspections. And so the IA Phase 2 team, which is myself and Miguel and John and Natalie and others, have developed a work group that are part of developing this process. So we have different subgroups that I'll talk about in a moment. And we're essentially establishing a program, establishing processes and procedures, and as we'll talk about shortly, establishing a staff, a specialized staff to conduct comprehensive food defense inspections. And this will be conducted on a subset of our total inventory that we'll prioritize for these comprehensive inspections. Okay, so let's go into a little bit more detail on the food defense comprehensive inspections. These will go beyond the Food Defense Plan Quick Checks. This will include a detailed review of the food defense plan, the rationale, the conclusions that the facility came to when they were developing that plan, and we'll be determining whether that food defense plan is in fact adequate under the intentional adulteration rule. So we'll be looking in detail at that plan. The quick checks were a presence-absence determination. So this goes beyond that. We're looking at adequacy determinations. Then we will also be determining whether the plan is being implemented. So if a mitigation strategy is identified in the food defense plan, we need to make sure that that mitigation strategy is being put into practice within the facility. This inspection will be conducted by specialized people within the Office of Human and Animal Foods, and this is what we're calling the Food Defense Inspection Team. These are specialized CSOs that will undergo advanced food defense training, and they will also have support from CIFSAN Food Defense SMEs for real-time technical consultation and support when they're in the facility, but this will be a small subset of our human food inspector staff. And so Miguel will go into more detail of the Food Defense Inspection Team. So let's get into some of the program requirements that we've identified when we were developing the Food Defense Inspection Program. We had a number of considerations that we needed to be aware of and plan for when we were developing the Food Defense Inspection process. The key ones are here on the slide. The first one is information security. Our inspectional staff will be exposed to and required to review highly sensitive industry food defense information when they're conducting these food defense inspections. This information is more sensitive than any typical trade secret food safety information that we might be typically exposed to during a food safety inspection, such as formulations, ingredients, recipes, etc. Food defense plans identify critical facility vulnerabilities to intentional adulteration and the strategies used to mitigate or protect against those vulnerabilities. Consistent application of the IA rule is also required. This is a regulatory program with no historical precedent or established compliance history. And so we're implementing a new regulatory paradigm, and management of this program in a consistent, even way is critical to ensure that industry understands what FDA is expecting and lends credibility to the program itself. FDA's oversight of the IA rule in an inconsistent way or haphazard way could potentially weaken the IA rule and weaken food defense protection as a whole across the food system. Inconsistent conclusions regarding the adequacy of food defense planning and decisions in industry must be minimized or eliminated to the extent possible. And this will lend us to kind of what I'm going to talk about in the next slide with regards to how the Food Defense Inspection Team was structured and some of the decisions that we came to in developing that team. We also recognize that our regulatory resources are limited, and so we need to make sure that we're using our resources in the best, most efficient way. So food defense comprehensive inspections will be conducted on prioritized facilities that will be identified through a food defense specific analysis. And so we're going to be focusing our resources on the areas of greatest concern and those facilities where we think there is a elevated reason to be more focused on food defense inspections. And we all know that our resources need to be placed in the areas of most impact, and so this is no different than any other regulatory program. So we're going to be identifying specific facilities where we think that food defense inspections need to be conducted. So with those program requirements in mind, we went forward and we developed our plan for establishing the food defense inspection team. And so we had some organizational considerations that we wanted to ensure that we were taking into account when we were developing these. And we think that the best way to implement the intentional adulteration rule is through a specialized team of CSOs that will be conducting these food defense inspections, but they will also be conducting food safety work while they're at these firms. We can't have blinders on when we're conducting our food defense work. The agency is a food safety agency, and we need to make sure that we're conducting work in both program areas. So our CSOs are going to be specialized in food defense, but they're also going to be advanced CSOs in food safety. They're going to be experienced, and they're going to be knowledgeable in food safety. So we're going to be doing a food defense inspection as well as food safety inspections while this food defense inspection team is out in the field visiting these facilities. They will undergo advanced training to enable them to come to appropriate decisions regarding compliance and adequacy when they're at the firms, and will be able to work with firms to provide them with information that might support their compliance. As we all know, we educate while we regulate, especially with some of our new regulations under FSMA, and the intentional adulteration rule is certainly no different than that. And so these CSOs will be specialized and, as I mentioned, go through an advanced training curriculum. We also believe in order to enforce consistent application of this new regulatory program, and since the food defense inspection team is going to be very specialized, we felt that unifying this organization under singular management structure was the most appropriate way to implement the IA rule. So the food defense inspection team will report up through a single supervisor. Miguel will go into more detail about this in just a moment. But we believe that this is the best way to enforce consistent application of the IA rule, because the CSOs will be being managed by a single person through a single structure, and so they won't be receiving different guidances from different managerial organizations. We also believe that having a national scope of responsibility is important. And so while the CSOs under the food defense inspection team may not be located in the same area, they might be located geographically spread across the country, they will all be operating on a national scope of responsibility. So we do want to make sure that we're using our resources efficiently and effectively. So we do expect that the CSOs under the food defense inspection team will be located in different geographical regions to minimize travel costs and time, but they will all be reporting up through that singular management structure. We also think that this provides an agile national inspection system and potentially a response capability in the potential unfortunate event that we might need to respond to an intentional adulteration. The food defense inspection team will be able to respond on a national scale and will be able to go anywhere that they need to because we'll have a national scope of responsibility. So with those program requirements and those organizational considerations, what do we have left to do? I mentioned that we've already been conducting food defense plan quick checks, and so we're now in the process of developing this food defense comprehensive inspection program and building out the food defense inspection team. And so we need to, as I mentioned multiple times, we need to develop that training. We are developing a comprehensive inspection training program right now for the Food Defense Inspection team. We have a course design. We are developing content right now, and so we expect that to really come into full, fruition in the next several months. We will be in the next several months also developing a food defense comprehensive assignment for these inspections. It will go into what facilities we want to focus on, and we'll lay out the process and procedures that we will follow when we conduct comprehensive inspections for the IA rule. I mentioned also earlier in a slide that we are focusing on information security. So we are developing our processes and procedures for the how, when, what, and why we would collect food defense information from firms. We're also identifying our IT resources that we need for transmission, access control, and storage of any food defense information that we need to collect. And so we have a dedicated subgroup under the IA rule process for developing our IT resources and needs, as well as our processes and procedures for information security. We are also in the process of developing the food defense inspection team. We have position descriptions for CSOs that we would like to announce, and the process for making those announcements is going through agency HR, and we hope to be able to announce the CSO positions for the Food Defense Inspection team shortly. Miguel will go into much more detail about this, but our initial plan is to bring aboard 5 CSOs and 1 supervisor to manage the Food Defense Inspection team. And I'm happy to announce that we have been able to move forward with establishing the supervisor of the Food Defense Inspection team, and that is Miguel Hernandez, who I will hand off the presentation now. So congratulations to Miguel for coming on board as the Food Defense Inspection Team Supervisor, and I will hand off the presentation to him.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you. So yeah, I was recently selected to be the Food Defense Inspection Team Supervisor by Gerard Bromley. And I am transitioning right now between my Produce Safety Network work and moving forward with the Food Defense Inspection Team, which I'm happy to announce that we'll be hiring 5 CSOs. We'll start with 5 CSOs, and then we'll move to more CSOs probably in the future, but we'll start small because like Colin said, this is a very different type of regulatory framework, and we want to make sure that it's manageable. The CSOs will be located throughout the U.S., but they'll be working in facilities throughout the whole nation, so we don't have to worry about that. Right now, at this moment, we will be under the DDHAFO, Division of Domestic, Human, and Animal Food Operations, but that is subject to change with any reorganization and anything that might happen with that. So, but for now, let's assume and let's move forward by saying that we'll be under the DDHAFO. Our director, Gerard Bromley, will be overseeing our operations within the Food Defense Inspection Team. We are currently building, like Colin said, we're building training for these 5 CSOs, and we are also building processes and process maps and SOPs. So we want to make sure that once these 5 CSOs are on board, we'll basically have them ready to start getting training and start conducting inspections, hopefully by September 24. So we'll see about that. A key to our success on this program is work closely with SMEs and work closely with the center, Colin's and John's staff, and also the Office of Compliance. Because like we said, this is going to be different. It's going to be a different framework. And we want to make sure that we have the right people next to these 5 CSOs and myself to guide us through the food defense inspection. So like Colin explained, we'll be conducting, for reasons of disclosure, we'll be conducting these inspections. The one visit will consist of 1 food defense inspection and then a parallel food safety inspection. And we want to make sure that we have the right resources for those 5 CSOs. Okay, this is the org chart that will be taken in place within DDHAFO, within the Division of Domestic Human Animal Food. But again, this is subject to change. It might be changing with the reorganization, but for now, this is how we are be looking like. It will be a different division or branch or group within the DDHAFO. So let's talk a little bit about who we are looking for on this new organization. These 5 CSOs, they should have the following traits, characteristics. They should not be afraid of change. Like we said, this is going to be a whole different scheme, a whole different perspective, and they should be open to new ideas. I mean, the way that we are going to incorporate this intentional adulteration rule is going to be by education, by regulation, and we have to make sure that that firms understand what is required from them, and our CSOs, they need to be flexible to understand that some of these firms will be new to this concept and they need to incorporate these requirements in a very sporadic way. Also, we are looking for CSOs that can be efficient because remember, like Colin explained, in each one of these visits, we'll be conducting 2 operations, 1 visit, 2 operations, 1 food defense inspection and one food safety inspection. So these CSOs, they have to be efficient, they have to be savvy enough to use their time very wisely when they are conducting this visit. We need to have experienced CSOs. We're looking for the best of the best. We're looking with CSOs with ample food safety experience. They should be proficient with PC, preventive controls, and they should be able to conduct any given inspection that we are required to. And I'll give you one example. We might have 1 seafood HACCP operation, 1 seafood HACCP manufacturer, processor, and the CSOs, 1 CSO that will go to this particular firm will basically go in there, inspecting under food defense 21 CFR 121, and then opening a new inspection under 21 CFR 123 seafood HACCP. So we are looking for that efficiency and that savviness in terms of food safety. And lastly, we are looking for CSOs with ample experience dealing with firms, talking to firms, educating firms, so we can make sure that we are passing the word, educating them while we regulate this inspectional adulteration regulation. And lastly, we need people that can be diplomatic. We need CSOs that can basically explain what is required from firms, what is the regulatory framework. At the same time, they can make a relationship with these firms that, again, will be new to this new requirement by 21 CFR 121. Just to reiterate, we want to start small, but we are looking forward to expand this food defense inspection team and make sure that we have enough coverage for the domestic responsibilities and in the future foreign responsibilities under the 21 CFR 121, the intentional adulteration rule. We're looking for efficiencies. We want to make sure that CSOs can conduct both food defense inspections and food safety inspections, so we are protecting consumers in both areas and both fronts. And we want to make sure that those CSOs will be able to work together, work with the supervisor, but more important, work with the center so we can get that knowledge. Remember, this is new for everyone, and although these 5 CSOs will be the best of the best in terms of food safety, but we want to make sure that they learn the ways of defense, and for that we need to rely on Colin and John to make sure that we get the right training and we can have those CSOs to gain the level of expertise that we need for the future. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening to us today. And John, back to you.
Thanks, Colin and Miguel, for your presentations. And now we're going to go over some of the questions that were submitted prior to the chat. Okay, Colin, I think this first question is directed to you. How do we know if a firm's facility or process evaluation is valid?
It's a good question. I think the question is referring to the vulnerability assessment specifically. And so It's important to recognize that the IA rule does include within its structure a great degree of flexibility for industry in conducting this analysis. However, the IA rule does stipulate and require that the vulnerability assessment considers some key components within that analysis. We call these the three fundamental elements of a vulnerability assessment. So the facility must include within its analysis an evaluation at each process step, the level of public health impact if the process step was intentionally adulterated. They also would need to evaluate the degree of physical access at each process step to someone that has the intent to intentionally adulterate that process step, and also the ease of introducing a contaminant in such a way that would result in wide-scale public health harm. So those are what we call the three fundamental elements of a vulnerability assessment. So those must be present within the analysis of the vulnerability assessment that the facility conducts. But the facility also, and the IA rule specifies this as well, the facility must also consider the actions of an inside attacker. And we determine that term to include anyone that has legitimate access to the facility. So this could be an employee, it could be a contractor, it could be a maintenance person, anybody that already has legitimate access to the facility must include consideration of that type of an individual within their vulnerability assessment. So if those elements are present in the vulnerability assessment and the CSO can determine that the vulnerability assessment has adequately and appropriately considered those elements within its analysis, we can come to a conclusion as to whether that vulnerability assessment is valid and has come to the appropriate conclusion.
Great, thank you, Colin. That's a great overview of the vulnerability assessment requirements, so thank you. Okay, second question, Colin. This may also be directed to you, but Miguel, of course, please feel free to chime in as well. How will we handle anonymous reports of intentional adulteration, whether in human food or pet food?
So this is something that we actually do respond to currently and have responded to historically. Whenever the agency gets through one information pathway or another, a report or a suspicion of intentional adulteration, we respond very quickly to it, and we take those reports very seriously. So, for example, if it comes into CFSAN, if we have a mailbox in the food defense staff that anybody can reach out to us. If we get a report of potential intentional adulteration, we instantaneously will reach out to the Office of Criminal Investigations. We'll reach out to ORA. Specifically, I would touch base with Miguel in this case. And we would come together as a team, a cross-organizational team, to determine whether this is a valid report, whether it's feasible, and whether we would need to respond to it. If it's in the event of pet food, we would reach out to CVM immediately and make sure that they're in the loop, and we would take appropriate action depending on what the report is.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, can you provide a cheat sheet or an outline of all pertinent questions we should ask or documents to review during this type of inspection? Colin, you want to take the first crack at that one?
Yeah, I'll take the first stab at this, and then I'll hand it off to Miguel on this one. This is going to be a key part of our training curriculum. Many of you who are conducting field work right now know that a variety of the rules have what we call an inspectional protocol within e-inspect. We also have an inspectional protocol for the Food Defense Plan Quick Checks that's within e-inspect. And so as we are developing our training curriculum for the comprehensive food defense inspections, we're going to be training the CSOs on exactly kind of what documents they need to review, what kind of questions they need to ask to make sure that the facility is conducting their appropriate responsibilities under the IA rule. Miguel, anything else on that one?
No, and that's a good question, because this is a new area for CSOs across DDHAFO. I mean, food defense, intentional adulteration is new, and that's why we need to establish a very robust training program so we can learn the ways of food defense. I mean, most of these 5 CSOs, they'll be experts on the food safety. There'll be experts on the regulatory process, on the inspection process, sampling process. However, we have to make sure that they are now the new experts on food defense at the field level with ORA. So that's the goal. The goal is to establish these 5 CSOs as the person to go with an ORA at the field to handle food defense situations.
Yes, as so often is the case, training is absolutely going to be critical here for our new instructors. Good responses, guys. The next question, Miguel, I'll direct this one to you. How do these IA inspections differ from standard inspections?
That's a great question. Thank you, John. So, and again, I am no expert at food defense. I mean, I have an expertise at the food safety side of the house. So let's talk about food safety. Food safety inspections are conducted under regulations. Let's keep my example from before. 21 CFR 123, seafood hazard. We have CSOs across the nation. They're experts assessing seafood producers, and we conduct those inspections following the regulation, again, 21 CFR 123. But then when we move to the food defense inspection, we are enforcing or overseeing a different regulation, 21 CFR 121. And the way that we are going to structure this, just because the disclosure situations that Colin explained before, and the sensitivity of documents we collect under food defense inspection. So to prevent those issues and disclosure, potential disclosure issues and FOIA issues, we're going to have one inspection. Keeping my example, 21 CFR 123, food hazard. We're going to close that inspection and then open a new inspection, a new 482, under 21 CFR 121, food defense intentional adulteration. So we'll be conducting 2 different inspections within one visit, and that's the goal, and that's the plan based on the reality and the sensitivity of documents collected under food defense, and how we want to protect that information from normal food safety inspection. So the concept of the inspection is the same. It's the framework of the inspection is under Section 704 of the law, FDNC Act, Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. It's the same concept. It's 704. We issue a 482, show credentials that give us the authority to conduct inspection, but there'll be 2 different inspections in one visit, just for the reasons I just mentioned a moment ago. So again, food defense inspections, food safety inspections, the same idea, the same concept, the same legal framework under 704, but 2 different operations. And we'll be providing training to the CSOs. We'll be creating SOPs, and we are now working on those SOPs to make sure that when the CSOs get in place, we are clear on those 2 distinctions. And also we are working already with the divisions, with the DDHAFO divisions, to make sure that we collaborate and communicate with the divisions very well when we go out and do inspections, say in California or Colorado, wherever. So hopefully I answered your question, John.
You sure did. Thanks, Miguel. And kind of a related follow-up question. How will IA compliance actions be handled? Okay,
that's a good question. Right now, let's make it the distinction again. The food safety inspections that we'll be conducting will be handled through normal compliance, division compliance. We know that reorganization is going to happen, but yeah, we'll be working with the division's compliance. Let's talk about how to Kansas City District. We'll be working, and if we have issues on food safety inspections during our visits, we'll be working with Half-West 2 compliance, subject to change, of course. But then when we conduct the food defense inspection, we'll be working directly with Colin's group, with FSMA experts, FSMA OC, because that's a new framework, regulatory framework, and we'll be working directly with FSMA when we have issues, when we find possible observations, when we find possible issues during the food defense side of the visit. The food defense inspection will be basically working directly with Colin and his team to make sure that compliance is achieved. And the way that we are going to achieve compliance at the food defense inspection side of the house, if you will, will be completely different from the regular, typical food safety, seafood hazard violations, observations, working with compliance, taking actions. Food defense is going to be different, and we have to recognize that education is going to be a huge part of this for the first year, maybe 2 years of this inspection. So the compliance will be different. Compliance will be more like education while regulating, but at the same time, if we find issues at the food defense, we'll be working directly with Colin, and we'll evaluate what tools, what regulatory tools that we'll have to make sure that we are in compliance. So we're learning, we're trying to anticipate how those will look like, but it's too new, it's too early for me to say how the food defense compliance will look like a year, 2 years from now. And Colin, please chime in if you have to at this point.
Yeah, it is an interesting question because obviously the food safety work is within a division's area of responsibility, so we're developing procedures and operating practices for coordinating with divisions right now, especially when we're talking about deconflicting food safety work from the food defense inspection team and division workloads, et cetera. But the food defense compliance process will go through, as Miguel mentioned, a SIFSAN kind of review process and technical evaluation, and then we'll determine what the firm needs to do, and we'll have those discussions with the firm on an individual basis.
Yeah, actually, if I may say, we already have an SOP process map work group going on, and I'm happy to say that members of those of that particular work group, there are DIVs from DDHAFO, there are state liaisons, there are people that are really engaged in the divisional DDHAFO divisional kind of work, and we are making sure that we collaborate with divisions moving forward, and this food defense inspection team is in close communication with each one of the DDHAFO divisions before we do anything. So I am optimistic on how this will look like and how we'll be able to engage with every division every time we're going to do one of these inspections. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you both. On to the next question. This is an interesting one, and it ties into the food defense inspection team and how they will or will not interact with the foreign food cadre. So it's a longer question, so bear with me for a second, but I'll open it up to both of you gentlemen. Will food defense inspection team members travel with the foreign food cadre inspection team and conduct inspections together, or will the food defense inspection team conduct their own inspections completely independent of the foreign food cadre?
Excellent question. I'll jump in first and then hand it off to Miguel. So I mentioned that the food defense inspections will be conducted on prioritized facilities. And we would identify those facilities through a food defense specific analysis. And so for domestic facilities, we will be conducting a separate food defense specific work planning process, whereby we would identify firms that we want to go out to for a food defense specific reason, separate from typical food safety work planning. I think we all need to be cognizant of the fact that in the foreign inspectional arena, there are significant resource and logistical challenges with conducting inspections. And so our strategy at this point in time is to review the foreign food safety work plan inventory in a given inspectional period, and then potentially identify firms that we think have an elevated food safety, or pardon me, food defense concern that would necessitate a food defense inspection from that existing population of firms. So we're not going to be identifying firms specifically, you know, for a food defense inspection globally. We're going to be looking at what food safety work we're planning to do in a given year, and then potentially elevate one of those firms for a food defense inspection. So in that instance, we would detail a food defense inspection team member onto that foreign inspection. So they would be accompanying the foreign food safety inspection team. That is the plan. We think that it's the most appropriate and realistic pathway for conducting foreign food defense inspections. I do want to make sure that if we do come into information that a firm requires something individualized, let's say that we are referred to a firm by the Division of Food Defense Targeting because they're seeing problems with a firm's import behavior, for example, we would work with the foreign food safety inspection cadre to see if we could put that firm on an inspection list or something like that. But it would be definitely in coordination and collaboration with the foreign inspection cadre. Miguel, anything I missed there, or correct me on anything?
No, I think you have it right, and that's the vision. The vision is that eventually the Food Defense Inspection Team, CSOs, will be conducting foreign inspections. We are not there yet. We are trying to establish the domestic first, and then we'll jump to the foreign. For sure, we'll jump there. But yeah, that's the vision. Long run, this 5 years will be conducting foreign inspections. I mean, and like similar to other areas. I'll use one example. For example, the Produce Safety Network CSOs, they do conduct foreign inspections. So I can see the same aspect going on with the FDIT CSOs. That's my take.
Okay, thank you both. Colin, I think I'll direct this next question, or two questions actually combined, to you. But of course, Miguel, please feel free to chime in. How will this affect limited scope inspections? That's part A of the question. And the second part is, how will this affect dairy farms?
Good question. So I'll take the first one and then address the dairy farm issue. So Miguel mentioned that we're going to be, as part of the Food Defense Inspection Team, the plan is that we would conduct the food defense inspection, but we would also conduct whatever food safety work is also due for that firm in that given year. So for example, if the firm is due for a limited scope inspection and we've identified them for a food defense inspection, we would conduct that limited scope inspection by the Food Defense Inspection Team, and we'd coordinate with the divisions on that and scheduling and everything. If they're due for a full scope PC inspection, for example, then the Food Defense Inspection Team would also would conduct that inspection. If they're due for a juice HACCP inspection, while we're there for a food defense inspection, we would also conduct that food safety work. And so this is the way that we are able to kind of get a good, efficient use of our regulatory resources by having one visit and completing all of the work that's required that firm is due for. With regards to dairy farms, this is a little bit of a wrinkle within the IA rules coverage. FSMA specifically exempted farms from IA rule coverage with the exception of dairy farms. And so dairy farms are obviously very different than food manufacturing facilities. And importantly, dairy farms do not have to register with FDA as food facilities under the Bioterrorism Act. And so we are working with the National Conference of Interstate Milk Shippers, NCIMS. John is actually our point person on that. So he's interacting with that organization to try to identify what steps we need to put into place for any food defense requirements on dairy farms, and this is just a process that we're working through right now. But as of right now, food defense requirements are not present on farms of any type.
Okay. Thanks, Colin. And the last question, and I'll just open it up to both of you gentlemen, how will ORA and CIFSAN work together?
Miguel, do you want to start, or do you want me to start on it?
I can start. Well, let me go back a little bit in history. I was pulled into this food defense by my director, General Bromley, maybe 2 years ago. I mean, outside of my produce role, and I have been working so closely with Colin and his staff since day one on the planning logistics of this food defense inspection team. So that's why we want to start small. We want to start with 5 CSOs, 1 supervisor, so we can have that flexibility of connecting with FSMA right away when we have to. And so far, so good. Our communication has been brilliant, stellar, and I have no complaints. And the idea is once we bring those CSOs on board, we want to establish that culture of collaboration with Colin and his team throughout the operational side of this FDA. So I can predict that this will be better, even better. Our communication will be even better in the future, but we have to, ORA, FDIT, we have to work closely day by day, hour by hour with our counterparts because they are the SMEs. Again, like I said before, we are new, ORA, this supervisor, we're new to this food defense culture and this new food defense regulatory scope, and we have to learn from the SMEs, and they're SMEs, and I recognize that, and moving forward, I want to make sure that our CSOs obtain that knowledge from Colin's team. That's the plan, that's the goal, and I see a bright future ahead of us. Colin?
Yeah, I'll reiterate that and kind of go back in time and give folks kind of a context for how we've been working. It was, I think, a very wise decision to kind of organize, as part of FSMA implementation, each rule would have a champion from ORA and CFSAN. And so there were always a dual leadership process. And so, like, for example, our original champions under the IA rule were Joanne Givens and Bill Carell, and so we've moved forward with an incredibly collaborative dynamic ever since. Miguel and I speak at least once a day, most of the time, multiple times a day, and so we've really developed a seamless working relationship between FSMA and DDHAFO, and I just think that lays the groundwork for a really collaborative, cooperative working dynamic as we put this rule into implementation. We've already been implementing the rule, so I don't want to discount the actions of the field for the Food Defense Plan quick checks. Like I mentioned, we've already conducted over 1,200 of those quick checks, and we've developed training for that, and so it's always been a collaborative dynamic between CFSAN and ORA, and we will continue that moving forward, and there is always a free and unfettered exchange of information between the two organizations. And as we move forward into the new kind of organizational dynamic as part of the Human Food Program, this coordination that the IA rule has had between the program side and the operations side is not going to be impacted by that. Whatever the organization turns into, it's going to still be seamless and very fluid and collaborative.
Okay, thank you both, and I would confirm what you've both said. I think it's been an excellent collaborative relationship up to this point, and I know that will continue. So thank you both for the answers to those questions. That wraps up the questions received that were specific to the intentional adulteration rule and its implementation. As with previous chats, the slides from this session will be available on FSMA Chats for FDA staff on inside.fda.gov. This recording will also be available on the FDA YouTube channel. If you have additional questions, please see the information on our website, which you can find at fda.gov/FSMA, or use the QR code that you see on the screen. On behalf of the entire Food Defense and Inspection team, thank you for your time and attention today.